Hey, what's up guys? This is Calum or Kilm's Fish Tanks, and we are back for another video in the beginner's guide to your first planted tank. In this video, we're going to be talking about how you should light your first planted tank, depending on the size, how long you should light it, and all aspects associated with lighting. So let's change up the view and get started. So to start off, I'm going to be talking about the three different kinds of light: low, medium, and high lighting. I'm going to also be talking about which one you should go with. So what you're looking at currently is my first ever planted aquarium, and this tank just has regular kit lights with a couple of low powered LEDs, and this is what I would consider low lighting. I can grow some plants, but only the easiest of easy plants. On my planted fish bowl, I would consider I have high lighting. If you do keep planted tanks, you can see I'm growing some harder plants like Glossostigma right near the light shimmer, and some other easier plants as well. As you can see, all I'm using for this tank is just a regular LED. I think it's about 5 watts, so it's very low powered. But because this tank is so shallow, I'm able to grow the harder to grow plants without having to put on a powerful light. So whether your light is low, medium, or high really depends on two things: what kind of light you're using and how powerful it is, and on the depth of the tank you are using it on. So for example, if I put this light, it's rather weak, onto my planted bowl, I would be able to easily grow most medium to hard plants without CO2. But say I used the light I have on this tank, I'm not going to be able to grow plants as well as I would in my bowl, because this tank is a lot taller, so the light has a lot more water to travel through. Now for your very first planted tank, I would recommend going with medium light. Now you guys don't really know what that is, so I'll get into explaining it later, but I'm just going to explain why I would go with that right now. I'd recommend going with medium so you don't undershoot it too much, and you can grow most of what you put in, even though, like, for a beginner you don't know how hard most plants are, so you have a better chance of growing what you put in than killing it. So say you listen to my advice given to the first video, I'll put a link to that up in the top corner, and you have went with, say, a 10-gallon tank. Now a 10-gallon tank, I would recommend going with 2 standard desk lamps with 13-watt bulbs, because it is a rather long tank and you're going to want to spread it out a bit further. Say you go with a 5-gallon tank, I would recommend doing one. I've done this in the past and I got really good plant growth, and you're going to be really successful with your first planted tank if you follow those tips. Here you can see my planted cube, and as you can see, I've went with just one because it isn't a very long tank, and I've actually went with a 26-watt bulb instead of a 13, and with this I should be able to grow almost all plants I want except for the very difficult ones. Now when selecting what kind of light bulb you use in your light fixture, you want to go with something between 5,000 and 7,500 Kelvin. You should be able to see that on the box, and this is the best spectrum for growing plants and making sure you won't get a bunch of algae. Now say you have already bought your tank and you've went with something over I recommended in my selecting your tank video. Say you get something between 15 and 20 gallons. I would recommend going with a Finex light. You could even push a Finex light on, say, a 30-gallon. But say you go over something like a 30-gallon or something that's higher than 18 inches, I would recommend going with something like the Fluval Freshen Plant 2.0. This would be a great beginner light for most tanks over that size that you could be starting with, and you're going to get really good plant growth. Now if we talk about my last video, I recommend going with a smaller tank, and that's because lighting doesn't really scale up well in price. So for example, if you go with the recommended lighting I suggested on this tank, it would be around $30 or $40. But say you get a 40 breeder like I have downstairs, my light was $200 for that tank. So you can see how it really gets expensive. And with your first tank, you don't really want to spend all that money because you're going to make mistakes and you're going to get algae probably and all that stuff. But that's what this series is about. It's about not making mistakes and teaching you how not to make them. So depending on what you have chosen as your light, you want to start off your light cycle slow. So something like 4 or 5 hours, because your plants are not going to be used to the environment. They're not going to be rooted, and they're not going to be able to use all that light. And all this extra light is going to end up turning into algae. So you want to start off at 4 or 5 hours and let your plants kind of acclimate to the tank like you would let fish acclimate to a new tank. and then you would slowly ramp up your light. So if you have something like a low light, you may be able to get up to 8 or 10 hours. And if you have very, very powerful, you may be able to get up to 6 or 8. So it all depends on how powerful your light is, but you shouldn't really be going over 12 hours a day for your light. I would also recommend getting a timer, because this way it's fluctuating less how long you have your light on, and this is going to give you better plant growth and better behavior out of your fish, so they have like a cycle. So anyways guys, that does it for selecting lighting for your first planted aquarium. I hope some of you guys found this helpful, whether you're a beginner or you're experienced in just watching the series. Anyways, I'll see you guys next Tuesday for a video on selecting your substrate for your first planted tank. Anyways, peace. This was Kelvin's Fish Tanks. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.